Voice and video data can be hard to wrangle, but it is key to so many business functions. Everything from business intelligence and safety to compliance and regulatory requirements. Today, we're talking with a company that provides the plumbing to make it all go. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is Chris Brandt here with Sandesh Patel. Welcome to another FUTR podcast. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment to ask you to subscribe. 95% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed, and that really helps. Today, we're talking with Redbox, not the video rental boxes that you find in front of your grocery store, but Redbox, the video and audio capture platform that helps you make the most of your data. They have long been a big player in the compliance recording space, but now video and audio is being used for a wide range of very valuable purposes. So we have with us Pete Ellis, CPO of Redbox, to tell us about some of the challenges of working with video and audio and how businesses are extracting value from this information. Welcome, Pete.
Welcome. Nice to be here, Chris.
Tell me a little bit about, about Redbox before we get into all the other, the whole video and audio piece of it. Tell me about what was the idea behind Redbox? What got Redbox started? What was sort of the founder story there?
I mean, Redbox is probably one of the oldest voice recording companies in the world. It started in late 80s. Really, what they concentrated on was recording from a compliance perspective. The need for recording, the need for retrieval, need for understanding, and to be able to review calls that have had for whatever regulatory purpose. Typically in emergency services, healthcare, financial services, trading, those areas. And that's pretty much where they operated for the last 30 plus years. One of the sort of key global players in that market. And it's quite a difficult market. It's a complex market. So many different systems out there, so many complexities of systems, yet regulations are really clear. And customers have to have best endeavors on capturing those calls. And that's really where we've concentrated our effort, primarily in the earlier years. Changed more recently, but in the early years, that's what we focused on. I suppose in the last 3 or 4 years, you've got to understand we're capturing billions of calls for our customers. It's a staggering amount of data. And there's sort of two things you can do with it. One is what we've done for years, which is compliance, and really capturing them, storing them, and managing them for regulatory reasons. And the second piece is then saying, okay, we've got this massive data, this extremely rich data set that has historically not really been available for our customers. What can we do to enable them to take value from this data? And we started really running with that philosophy about 3 or 4 years ago and sort of understanding how can we open and liberate this data for our customers. Because it's not just contact centers, it's back office, it's remote workers, it's mobile workers, it's trading floors. And there's a staggering amount of information. So how can we liberate it? And that's sort of our mantra. How can we open this up for our customers?
Just in the last few years, we've just seen an absolute explosion of applications that involve audio and video components. I mean, everything from, AI-backed call centers and that sort of thing, to just, extracting pure, relevant data and correlating it with other things to, produce, rich data sources. And I got to imagine also that with the pandemic and everybody working from home, that really changed the landscape, because you went from, everybody sitting in a call center or a trading floor, at a trading desk, to now people working all over the country, all over the world, from home and from office and things like that. So the requirements, just alone, the regulatory and compliance requirements must have just been really complicated when that all happened, right?
I suppose there's two things that's happened over the last 4 years, and we'll include the pandemic in that. That's probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's when the ability to take this unstructured data, whether it's audio or video, and put it in a structured format in a timely enough fashion, as good enough accuracy as is possible, happened. That was sort of the first tranche. The pandemic side, I suppose, changed the thought process on voice, in my view, because voice was declining slightly in the use in the contact centers, but only around 1% a year. And I think the pandemic changed that. People wanted to speak to their vendors and their service providers. They didn't want to be restricted to social media, chat, and non-verbal communication. So that also accelerated the use of voice on the back of what was happening already in that industry. And it sort of accelerated it, certainly in the last 2 years. And in those times when customers are struggling, you look at how can you serve your customers better? How can you provide more value to your customers? So really, that also highlighted the use of this data set that we've never had access to before that allows us to understand our customers better, serve them better, understand them better, and we'll probably go into the details on that, but also our agents and our employees, because there's some communications there that we may have been manually looking at for a period of time, but can we look at them all and really understand how do we train them better, how do we reduce attrition in the contact centres. So the amount of use cases on top of then AI that's coming in with the intelligence has just exploded. However, I would say it's still infancy. You've still got quite a big divide between those that are just doing keyword searches to contextual analysis. Video is a different game, and that's slightly separate at the moment. But certainly from an audio, it's still early days, but the investment is amazing. The amount of companies that are sort of coming out to the woodwork in terms of niche specific areas is really interesting. So what we found, certainly in our market, is that we're capturing all these data sets, these voice data sets. But in terms of how you process them, it's different per department. You've got one department doing debt collection, one doing sales, one doing service, and they all typically require access to a different application that's really specific and niche for that. Because this analysis isn't easy. So it's a horrendously interesting area at the moment. And to your point, is exploding, partly because of the pandemic.
You guys have made a name for yourself in the compliance and regulatory space, and I don't know that people who are not used to what the requirements are. I mean, I assume there's a lot of different country-based requirements. I mean, I got to imagine with GDPR and things like that creates all sorts of challenges and you do not only just sort of the capture, but sort of the routing and getting everything to where it needs to go.
Coming from compliance gives us a lot of credibility, and I'll explain why. So compliance really is all about obviously ensuring you're capturing all calls, or best endeavors to ensure you're capturing all the calls. That's from a customer's perspective. That's their requirement. And then when you have that information of that transaction, how easily can you get access to it and to be able to send it to the regulators or analyze it? So there's two things there. One is you're capturing all calls, and two is how can you find that call? So it's also about the metadata about that call, because there's no point capturing a conversation if there's no information about it. So those are the two things. It may sound really simple, but when you're capturing millions of calls for a single customer a day, ensuring you're capturing all those calls with the appropriate level of metadata, which some of our customers, we've got 50 pieces of metadata per call, is no mean feat. That's why you see only 3 or 4 players globally that have come up through compliance, because yes, it's complicated to capture, but it's also complicated to do it at scale and to be able to give a customer the confidence that they're meeting their regulatory needs, because they're quite complex, as you say, per country, but the overriding thing is you capture everything with the right amount of information and you can retrieve it. But what that's helped us, I suppose, in this new AI market, let's call it, is that a level of trust that at its very basic level, we're not missing a call. That may sound easy and simple, but that is not easy and simple. We can go into why that's complex, but it isn't. And I suppose that gives our customers a very comfort factor from that as a basics, because it's not a given. Certainly not in the large financial services industry.
One of the things I know you do is that you do very high quality capture. It's not like really compressed capture, because one of the things that's necessary for some of the things that you're doing with that data is that it requires that higher resolution of quality to perform some of these functions. And I gotta imagine you're talking about millions of calls. That, from a just pure bandwidth perspective, is a lot.
Well, that's it. So customers really looking for an ROI on whatever they're looking to analyze from these calls. So it's important that we're capturing at the highest quality. And there's a few things around it. One is the flexibility of where you're capturing, as you said, compressed. Now, we are not in control of whether the call's compressed or not, but we're in control of where we can capture in the network. So it allows us to capture at multiple places where maybe it's uncompressed, because compressed data really does affect the ability to analyze and transcribe that call. Also, it has to be in stereo. You need to know who's saying what, and you can't guarantee that unless you're capturing in stereo. And again, there's flexibilities in how you capture to achieve that. And then the third thing, which I said before, is metadata. The metadata is just exploding for us. It's sometimes more important or as important as the audio. So, what metadata can we capture, not just on the telephony, but the surrounding environments? But what makes it difficult? So there's sort of three ways you can capture audio. You either capture it a proprietary way from the vendor, so they have proprietary ways of capturing. You go down a semi-standard route, which is SIPREC, but it's very basic. There's not really much metadata from it, and you're not really in that much control. Or you can capture it at the network layer. So those sort of three problems in itself. Then on top of that, if we're capturing, say, 1 million calls a day, so you've got a problem in capturing audio in the sense that each vendor can affect the bit rate of the call, can affect a codec on a call. You've got delays, you've got packet loss, and how do you deal with those? And that can be different per vendor. And that's just at the audio level. So that's one side of capture. The second piece then is the metadata, typically CTI data within an ACD at a contact center. There is no standard for that. Every platform is completely different in how you capture it and the format of it. No comparison between them all. Cisco, Avaya, Genesys, Amazon, Teams, Mitel, all completely different. And you've got to stitch that with this complex audio side. That's what makes the difference. Anybody can capture a few thousand calls reasonably easy, but hundreds of thousands without missing one. And to be able to attach multiple pieces of metadata. So the metadata is interesting. So you got it from the telephony, you got it from the contact center, you got it from AD, you got it from CRM, you got it from the desktop. It's really interesting because we're sort of becoming that golden record now of an interaction with the customer, because we're storing things like CRM ID. So when it's passed then to multiple data lakes and applications, they're sort of the key that ties all this information together as that call's passed through the contact center and the back office and then out to various applications. So it just sounds easy when you say we're voice recording, but and it's no easier in the cloud either, by the way. Everybody says on-premise is difficult with the traditions, but cloud is just as difficult.
Like when you're storing this, are you presenting it, to these other functions as sort of like a unified set of media? Because I have to deal with all sorts of different bit rates and codecs and sample rates, and it is just a nightmare. And I'm just doing a little bit in my, very controlled sort of video and audio world here. When you talk about all the different, options that there are for all those different vendors, I can't even imagine the complexity of that. But are you transforming that data, or are you just sort of capturing in all those native formats and keeping that raw data, or are you providing one sort of lingua franca kind of view to everything?
So there's a couple of things there. For compliance, we store it in the native form. We don't change it. And that's really important for compliance, because you've got to prove you haven't tampered with that data. So from that side, but because we've positioned ourselves as the openware for audio capture, so for want of a better word, where we're looking to liberate customers' data and give them access to where they want to. So we provide multiple ways of AI platforms to consume this data. Because again, they're not voice experts, all these AI companies out there that are doing things with the audio. It's quite foreign to them. So we do two things. One, we have a sort of capability in terms of how we distribute the data, so a full policy engine. So you can distribute the data based on any metadata that's captured to any place you want. Secondly, we offer them to either get it to your point is in a packaged format. So the whole call in one format. So post call, it's in a WAV, it's in an Opus, it's an MP3 if they wish, with the metadata, with the bit rate that they want. And there you go, you can have it. And that's constantly being sent to them. Or they can have it in real time. So in milliseconds, we send those packets constantly, 10 millisecond chunks, 20 millisecond chunks, with the metadata that's changing constantly as well, potentially. And that's the latter part is something we've seen an uptake more recently. We had it years ago, but there was no applications to use real time. Whereas now, things like Agent Assist is the thing that's really taking off. And rightly so,
Right.
because attrition's still a problem in the contact center. So, to try and make every agent your best agent and have that little supervisor sat on the shoulder called an AI that has the consistency that a manual person doesn't have, it's fantastic. But it's still early days, I think.
You mentioned something earlier that I think is important to highlight is that, vendors all have their own sort of proprietary formats for dealing with things. And the fact that you kind of function as sort of a data agnostic sort of vendor in between, because you may have a call system that operates with one format and you may want to use a different AI-based system to, perform analytics or, help augment that call. But those two formats may not necessarily be entirely compatible or even optimal for, doing whatever AI work there is. So as, by sitting in sort of that translation layer and routing layer, you're making more things available, I would imagine, right?
Well, yeah, it's a really important factor. And I suppose one for our partners, because we have dozens of partners, and what sort of how we position this is they never change their format. It doesn't matter to them what we're capturing. It could be Amazon, it could be Teams, it could be Cisco. They don't know and don't care, really. They get it in the same format. Now, the metadata may change slightly, but it'll still be in the same format of however they want it. But that's the killer for them, is they're always getting it in the same way. So from a business perspective, they can approach any customer because they know, by putting our middleware in, they can get access to that data, whether that's in the cloud or on-premise. And also which we see a lot, is we're still probably deploying 9 times out of 10 on-premise. There's still a reluctance for customers to be, to stream audio into the cloud. So I suppose by us capturing it locally, we obviously encrypted it before we send it through to whatever AI vendor, gives them a greater control and comfort, rather than just purely stream straight into the cloud. That
definitely sounds extremely valuable for all the vendors out there who are, looking to, get a deal done, and they're walking into all these, really different environments all the time and trying to make all that work. So, you talk a little bit about, some of your vendor partners and some of the things that you help integrate. Could you talk a little bit about, like, you mentioned, the rise of sort of like, augmented chat agents and things like that, but there's a lot of really different uses for audio and video these days. I mean, could you speak to some of the kinds of things and some of your ecosystem that you help enable,
Sure.
And what are people doing with all this stuff?
I'll step back slightly first, though. I suppose there's two trains of thought in terms of the AI vendors out there. There's those that are extremely good at the analysis and the insights, the contextual analysis of that conversation. And there are those that are good at the next best action. So I think it's still evolving to get those two combined, because we've certainly seen some brilliant providers in the past that could analyze the calls and have great meaning out of these calls, brilliant, whereas others are doing keyword spotting, which is obviously quite basic from years ago, but then they don't know what to do with that data. So you do certainly have to have both things, the insights and then the what next. So we've certainly seen a divide between that over the years. But in terms of the use cases, I mean, historically was surveillance and compliance. That was sort of the key analytics portion of our business, and we did a lot in the trading floor. Then came along really customer journey analytics. So really analyzing calls so you could understand your customers better, serve them better, sell to them better, rather than relying on surveys and prompts and direct interactions. It's a raw, unsolicited data that you're getting, so the meaning of them is far better. And a lot of our customers' contact centers run from this data as well. So if there's any issues in the contact center, it's really weird that, because it's not. We've only really seen that more recently, that they are absolutely, even when it's post call, rely on changing things in their contact center based on this analytics. But I suppose the biggest or the most use case that's really in the essential at the moment is the real time. And I think that definitely has come out about because of the pandemic, especially around agent performance. Absolutely. It's really weird. We've always been talking about customer service and the customer side. I think the agent side is the one that's getting all the highlights at the moment. And as I said earlier, you still got high attrition in the contact centers. The training factor on agents is huge, and getting every agent to be a best agent is now impossible. And old QM methods of monitoring agents is limited. And it's interesting because that whole market as well is still moving slow. So Agent Assist has sort of come in really left field and sort of promises to have a supervisor on your shoulder. That's sort of what it's all about. But I like it because it's not just analyzing the call consistently in real time. We can talk about the problems of real time, but let's assume it's not problematic. So you're monitoring real time, and you're providing a consistency on that review of what's happening. You're taking the emotion from the analytics, but you're providing a consistent view of that. But you're also taking into account other data that a supervisor wouldn't know. So CRM data, ServiceNow data, marketing data, and using that to build then a picture of what's the next best action, or what coaching or what information to send to the agents. And that's the area where we're seeing most investment as well, certainly from Silicon Valley and out in Texas, staggering amounts of funding, and rightly so, because it's probably one of the biggest problems if you park the customer side. And getting that right is very, very difficult. And it makes it, I suppose the pressure on us is a lot more as well, because we have to be better and faster, and providing more metadata. So we have to change. So we provide also metadata as it changes throughout the call, which also is not easy, because usually it's metadata at the start of the call and maybe at the end of the call. And can we get it in 250 milliseconds rather than maybe half a second? Because the more we add on, it's more difficult then to prompt the agent. It's funny because we saw bits of this a couple of years ago where you saw smiley faces and happy or unhappy faces, which really wasn't delivering anything significant in the contact centers. It's moved on quite a bit, but I'd still say infancy, but it's the most exciting. So the ones in terms of verticals we deal with most, sales, obviously that came up first with likes of Gong and Chorus, obviously. Makes sense because the ROI is really easy. Then really came service, followed on from that, which you would expect for customer service. But now we're also seeing some really niche ones like debt management. How do you help your agent extract money from a customer that's in debt? I'll tell you, there's one thing. So in terms of use cases, there's an interesting one we saw recently, which is again, some of these things that just come out, was promise management. So it detects that you made a promise to that customer during that call and then sends that through a workflow so it never gets forgotten. Brilliant. Simple, but absolutely brilliant. Because how many times have you promised on a call with a vendor and they don't follow through?
That's interesting. And many years ago, I worked for a credit union for a really enormous company, and they had I worked in the Visa. It was like issues like fraud detection and things like that back in the early days when it was much more manual. And I sat with all the debt collectors, right? And, like capturing just some of the threats and things that the debt collectors made that probably were out of compliance. And also the things that the customers said, I'll pay tomorrow. I got this going or that going. I can imagine that being really extraordinarily useful.
Biggest area we see for that at the moment is healthcare, which makes sense in the US.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Oh, yeah.
But they're popping up daily. These companies, and I think they are. I suppose AI lends itself to being that quite niche because it is quite complex. So it sort of makes sense.
Call centers are just a hot mess, when you encounter them, and I know that Sandesh has had his Comcast internet down for the last couple days, so I imagine he's had to deal with call centers most recently. I mean, I don't know what your take was on that experience, Sandesh.
Since I am in technology, I understand technology fails, right? But when it fails, like it does, it's really impactful. Like not being able to work on my Wi-Fi for 2 days for my wife and I was really, really tough. But what I was thinking the whole time was when I'm talking to this person, I'm trying to be so nice to them because I feel some compassion for them, right? Like they're just trying to help me. They're just trying to like figure this thing out themselves. And they keep saying things like, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for this and that and da, 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 da. And I'm just trying to stay calm, right? And I didn't, right? After a while, I'm like, I got so angry, right? I was just like, I have to go here. Like, how much longer is this going to take? You know? So my question is how does that kind of example, how does that correlate into your solution? You're recording that info. How are you taking it and translating it? And it doesn't sound like you do the actual AI against all that data. You create all the data. You give it in a format which then the customer can do something with that data. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we're sort of the middleware in that space. So we're consolidating the capture of all that information and getting it to wherever the customer wants it to go. So we shouldn't forget it's the customer's data. So they're in control of where that goes, whether it's to their own analytics areas or it's to multiple providers, and there are multiple. So yeah, no, we give them the control. And they have full API access to everything. They could even build the whole system themselves if they really wanted to from a voice recording perspective. But yeah, and that's important because this market just is exploding. But to your point is an interesting one, because somebody asked me this yesterday about dispute resolution. You know, compliance was typically outside of the contact center in the past, but you had it for dispute resolution. And that's where AI helps there, either post-call, reaching out to the customer to prevent a dispute, or in real time with some intervention. So it's an interesting one, just in that little niche thing that's always been there in the contact center from a compliance perspective.
You always hear that disclaimer. This call is being recorded for quality purposes or something like that, right? And I'm always wondering, like, when are you guys going to get better at this? You know, like, because I'm still getting so frustrated, man. Comcast is brutal.
But that's the problem. So they can only physically, supervisors can only physically probably listen to 5% of their agents' calls a day. You know, it's physically impossible. This really exploded for us in the trading floor. You know, because the traders are taking hundreds of thousands of calls a day, and it's nigh impossible for compliance officers to review them all. So it was really compliance and MiFID II in Europe that really sort of kickstarted this whole AI piece in the financial services sector, because it's physically impossible to monitor all those calls without AI. In those days, transcription wasn't as good as it is today. So about 4 or 5 years ago, it was about 80%. But you've got to consider analysing 100% of the calls with 80% accuracy is better than 2% of the calls manually.
You mentioned it's just like it's impossible to monitor all these calls, but that problem is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And in addition, it's not just like the monitoring of the calls; it's just finding people to field the calls that are going to have enough information at their hands or at their disposal to deal with those calls. So you have to be starting to integrate some sort of artificial intelligence, some sort of natural language processing to just to understand what's happening in the call and sort of deliver the information and the solutions at the time it's needed. And that real time audio capture and delivery to the many disparate platforms, I got to imagine is going to be a much bigger challenge going forward, right?
It is, yeah, but I do think it's, I suppose, the nirvana of what AI can bring to, I'll say contact centers, because that's probably where we're seeing the most explosion at the moment. It is, but the returns are huge, aren't they? They are significant, even just with the basic performance that we're seeing out of these companies today. And that's why, as I said, you've seen all the fundings go into these companies. It's from really serious players, serious organizations. They can see the value. It is the next evolution. Somebody said to me, well, what happens to those companies that are not doing it? Well, I mean, those companies are not going to fail either. They're just not going to accelerate as quick. It gives you an acceleration, in my view, AI does. But again, it's if implemented correctly, because what we have seen, which is, I suppose, important to understand, we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, these AI companies starting to grow with their investments and their maturity, and they've all been around the 100 to 200 seats they've been analysing, and they've been able to get those manually from the customer, analyse them and show them some value back. What's happening now is they're seeing value in these insights, that it's now saying, well, can you do it across my whole contact centre? And that's maybe 1,000 seats. And that's the point where you can't do it manually. You can't get these calls in batch without the right metadata, without the right quality. Doing it at 100, 200 seats is it shows a level of value, but we want more. So you've got to get it highest quality, and I want it real time, or at least as soon as the call finishes, because we're now running our contact center from this data.
Well, and I don't think companies fully understand how important this sort of thing is to their brand. I mean, I would love to see, and I don't know if you've ever done this analysis, but it'd be an interesting one to look at the NPS score of a company, prior to starting to implement these things versus after they implement these things, because I got to imagine that would be a really interesting metric to be looking at. Have you ever checked into that?
It is, but a lot of the vendors we work with sort of move on from CSATs and NPS and look more at effort scores we've seen, which I sort of think is a better metric. So that it's all about, what's the level of effort does a customer have to go through on every call? Can we make that as least effort as possible? From a customer service perspective, or even from a sales perspective. So we've seen it more shift really in terms of, because now we've got this sort of richer data set, can we shift how we're doing customer sat in the contact center, and can we look at it differently? So we've seen that more than, yes, they compare against NPS and CSATs and everybody puts up their great figures, but I think it's more a paradigm of shift on more around how we make it easier, rather than just straight customer sats from the past. So I think that's what we've seen more, which I agree with. It seems to work.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do either. From an AI perspective, that's incredibly difficult. But I think a lot of companies out there, they're starting up there, just think just doing the keyword mapping is enough. It's not, it's moving on fast.
Yeah, I think, we've seen a big explosion in the kind of post-purchase support. The post-purchase care and nurturing of a customer. Just everything from, shipping and logistics and integration of systems on the back end there to, just like all the opportunities for like kind of account-based marketing that come out of, integrating all these views into sort of a comprehensive perspective of what's happening with the customer and how satisfied they are, right?
It's, it's really difficult to, as I said before, train your agents to understand this. But you've got a consistent platform there that's able to, in real time, check all this information. And again, it all sounds great, but it isn't easy. But that's where it's going, and that's where it has to go. I go back to the statement I keep making. You just can't get the consistency out of a supervisor, and they may be biased as well. Dare I say it? Whereas an AI is never going to be biased. It's going to be straight talking and simple and straightforward, and probably has a consistent understanding of the emotion from the customer that's never going to be tainted by opinion or prejudice or anything, is it? And maybe these are not the right words to use on it, but I think it is. That consistency is huge that people don't fully get. I think they just think, okay, let's analyze all the calls and let's get some insights. No, it's that level of consistency and using a bigger data set around the voice to supplement your analytics that's really where it makes more sense.
You made the comment that it's all going this way, right? Like it's all like the world is going towards recording these calls. And I have firsthand seen this in my world. So I'm an outside sales guy. So I've been here for about 20 years and talking with my customers and whatnot. What I've learned is some of the partners, the technology partners that we work with, their sales teams are encouraged or required in some cases to record all of their calls with their customer. Okay. And when I first heard about that, to be honest, my first response was like, I don't want people listening in on my calls. I felt this immediate invasion of privacy almost, right? But I keep systemically seeing this, especially in these startups and these smaller companies. They're really trying to figure out how to use that data to help them in their sales and help their salespeople become better salespeople and things of that nature. So I think it speaks to a lot of just how sales is changing. It's this example right here. I mean, if there's a day I can tell you right now, if my current employer tells me I have to record every call, I'm probably not going to do that, but mostly because I'll get myself in trouble.
Sales is an easy one as well, doesn't it? Because you work out the mechanics of your best salespeople and how do they work, what drives them, and so forth, and you apply that to the analysis of every sales call, because not every person has emotional intelligence to understand the buying signs from a customer and the hook points, and that's why probably that industry's got a lot of attention first with the likes of Gong and Chorus and so forth. So that's the easy one. I still think there still is a mystification around things like transcription. I still think there's a long way to go. The reason why I say it's where it's going, because you've got to think over the years, how have contact centers evolved? Not massively. There's only so many ways you can take a call in a contact center and get it to the right person at the right time, with the right skills. There hasn't really much changed in 30 years. This is quite a paradigm shift in my view. And it will make it makes a big difference between winners and losers, I suppose. So it has to go this way, because why wouldn't you analyze this data set? You never before, instead of using your flat CRM or your flat internal system that says whether they buy this product or that, or whether they've got a service issue or not.
But that's really good data too. It's good field data, right? It's customer data. It's relevant to the business big time.
It is. As I say, we've started now seeing large contact centers use it to run the contact center. That's the big shift I've seen. I've never seen them use it to run their contact center before.
Where does this all go? What's next for Redbox? What's on the horizon for you?
We're doing a lot. Something in the past we've done with compliance recording is screen recording. It was never a major thing, but people obviously wanted to record the screens. A bit like collaboration on Teams, the same as the audio. We've seen that come back with a vengeance because of home workers. So screen recording is huge for us now. So that's a thing we're doing quite a lot of now and focusing on. What more can we do with screens? How can we identify what's happening there? What data can we take from it and so forth? But the big thing for us is metadata. Is how much more metadata can we capture these calls? Because there's very little else we need to do with the audio. We've been doing that for 30 years. But how much more can we capture? So, what the agents do on the desktop, as I said before, AD, what other systems, CRM systems, how much data can we add to each call? As I say, because we're doing about 50 pieces now, that's huge pieces of metadata, but they're valuable pieces to understand. For instance, if you've got a problem with the customer, so the customer's getting really irate, and your analytics has told you that you didn't do well with this customer. But then if you could also look to see what the agent was doing at the time, okay, you typed in the wrong URL or the wrong customer information. That was why the customer was getting frustrated. So it's about tying the metadata up now with the audio analytics. So that sort of gives you an indication of why more metadata really helps. So that's an area where we're providing a lot of focus on how much more flexibility can we give to customers in putting more data in here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, Pete, thanks so much for coming on and just, giving us some insight into an area I don't think that a lot of us encounter every day, but don't really always get to see how the mechanics of it all work. I love stuff like that.
No problem. Appreciate it.
I guess I'm an infrastructure guy. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you like what you saw, please give us a like and think about subscribing. That subscription is the best way to help this channel. And I will see you in the next video.